It's 5 p.m. here in Nigeria. Time for the world today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up on the program. Republicans close to overhaul control of U.S. Congress as President-elect Donald Trump makes new appointments. The Kremlin says reports that U.S. President-elect Donald Trump had spoken to the Russian president are completely untrue. Plus, the world leaders are gathering in Azerbaijan's capital to attend the 2024 United Nations Climate Change Conference. Let's begin the world today. The U.S. Republican Party is edging closer to overall control of the U.S. Congress, having already secured a majority in the Senate and needing fewer than 5 seats now to take the House of Representatives. A party needs 218 seats to win a House majority, and President-elect Donald Trump has 214, according to the latest data, compared with the Democrats' 205. Republicans are expected to hold at least 52 seats in the 100-member Senate after capturing 3 previously held by Democrats. Now, since winning the presidential election last week, all eyes have been on Trump to see who he appoints to serve in his administration. So far, President-elect Trump has named New York Congresswoman Ellis Stefanik as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and Tom Homan has been named to serve as Trump's border czar. In a post on his Truth Social platform, Trump said the 62-year-old Homan would be in charge of the nation's borders, including but not limited to the southern border, the northern border, all maritime and aviation security. He is also expected to be in charge of all deportation of illegal aliens back to their countries of origin. Meanwhile, Trump's pick of 40-year-old Stefanik for ambassador to the UN was made in a statement to the New York Post. She confirmed her acceptance of the role to the same newspaper, saying she was truly honored. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has denied speculations that the U.S. president-elect has spoken to the Russian President Vladimir Putin in recent days. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the reports are completely untrue and it's pure fiction. He noted that no phone talks occurred between both leaders last week, indicating that even though President Putin was open to dialogue, he had no concrete plans yet to speak to Trump. His statement comes after the Washington Post first reported that a call had taken place, citing unidentified sources, and said that Mr. Trump had told Putin that he should not escalate the Ukraine war. One leader who can confirm speaking to the president-elect is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He says he's spoken with Mr. Trump not once, but 3 times in the past few days, indicating the conversations were good and very important. He noted the talks were designed to further tighten the strong alliance between Israel and the United States. Mr. Netanyahu says both leaders touched on the great opportunities before Israel in the field of peace and its expansion and in other areas. While President-elect Donald Trump picks members of his incoming administration, he has so far named 2 women as part of it. Susie Wiles, who ran his campaign to the White House, and now Ellis Stefanik, who will most likely become America's ambassador to the United Nations under the administration. Vice President Kamala Harris was hoping to become the first female president of the United States, but fell short of the needed 274 electoral votes needed and did not clinch the popular votes either. Donald Trump has been declared winner with 312 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 226. He also gave her a wide margin of nearly 5,000 of the popular votes. This is not the first time a woman has attempted entering into the White House as president. Many women have sought to become president of the United States, some receiving national attention, others not. Hillary Clinton became the first woman major party nominee for president when she was nominated by the Democratic Party in 2016. This year, it was Kamala Harris who also became the first black woman and first black South Asian person major party presidential nominee when she earned the requisite number of votes from delegates to the Democratic National Convention. Kamala Harris is also the first woman to have won the office of the vice president in 2020. Three women have been nominated to run for the office of Vice President Kamala Harris by the Democratic Party in 2020. Sarah Palin, remember her, from the Republican Party in 2008, and Geraldine Ferraro by the Democratic Party in 1984. Another woman, Frances Sissy Farenthold, had her name put into nomination for Vice President at the Democratic National Convention in 1972. In addition, Toni Nathan, the 1972 Libertarian candidate for Vice President, became the first woman to win an electoral vote when one Republican elector voted for her instead of for his party's candidates. It's worth noting that other women throughout history of the United States have had their names placed into nomination and or earned electoral votes for Vice President, but did not receive wide support. At this point, I want to bring in national security law and foreign policy expert Joanna Blong. She joins us from Washington, D.C., and Professor of Communication and Media Studies at Murray State University in Kentucky, Senior Professor Bellarmine Izuma. Ladies, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Well, I just made a quick dive into women vying for higher political offices in the United States. It's taken a lot to get here, where we're seeing Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton run for president. But what are your thoughts as to how women have journeyed up until this point? Joanna?
Sure. First and foremost, I think that it's important that we acknowledge this historic moment by VP Harris. I think that she certainly paved the way for many women in the United States who aspire to higher office, and not just in the United States, in the global world. As you know, the United States is one of the leading countries in the world, and what happens in the United States influences what happens in the rest of the world. But unfortunately, she fell short of winning the presidency, and I think that as we go through this conversation, we'll talk about what went wrong. But I think that when you look at VP Harris's qualifications, this is someone who was a former senator, right? The U.S. Senate's second Black woman to hold such position. She was an attorney general in the state of California, one of the hardest states to win such post. And also, she was a state attorney as well. And so she is on paper certainly a woman who has accomplished a great deal of success. And I can tell you this, as a woman living here in America, you don't get to be mediocre and make it to the office to become vice president in America. As a woman, not just in America, but all over the world, you have to work 100 times more than your male counterparts to achieve some of the same level of successes, and sometimes even less. So while she did fall short on earning the presidency and winning the people's votes and the people's hearts here in America, I think it is important to know the contribution that she has made in terms of encouraging women to run for higher offices across the world.
Professor Bellarmine, your thoughts?
It is not just the United States, but it has been harder for women to occupy presidential or prime ministerial position. In fact, records have shown that only about 6% of current heads of state in the world are women. And this is not just in politics. I will have to digress a little bit and to include that it's also difficult, in the fields of education, religion, and business. But even looking at United States of America, I know that women have made some inroads, although more work needs to be done, because currently we have only about 23% of the congressional representatives that are women, and about a quarter, about 25% are U.S. Senate. And also bear in mind, the first woman to serve in the U.S. Senate was, Rebecca Felton in Georgia in 1922. So things have been happening, and again, yes, Kamala Harris definitely, her position is historic because she is the first, a woman and a person of color to hold the second position in in the United States of America. But also, I need to, mention a study by a group of Stanford researchers, because they want to find out why is it that women, are not occupying the high positions, and they found that, there are lots of, pragmatic biases that impede women access, to political leadership. And part of it is that, there is that general thought, or perception that women are less electable, or women have higher requirements to prove themselves. Because when you look at the candidacy of Kamala Harris and the candidacy of Donald Trump, people look at her, as maybe a third candidate, especially when you look at immigration or economy. So, people really, Americans, maybe would like to take action, to support women candidates, knowing that they can be as equally productive or equally impactful as their male counterparts.
Now, incidentally, both of you women and myself, we're all Black women. And here is a Kamala Harris who ran for office. She's also Black. She's also Indian. Did you both feel a sense of pride at her emergence as presidential candidate for a major political party in the United States? Professor Bellarmine.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear you very well.
So I'm asking, you're both women and you're both Black. Did you both feel a sense of pride when Kamala Harris emerged the Democratic presidential nominee or candidate?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It is a sense of pride, and, not just pride, but a sense of development and a sense of we are getting somewhere. Because, of course, the history of the United States, there was, some point when women or even racial, people who are Black were not even allowed to vote. But the fact that a woman emerged as the nominee for a major party, is a sense of pride. Even though, she did not make it, but that is a progress in the right direction.
Joanna?
Well, I think for me, I think that being realistic, while there was a great deal of excitement around the announcement of her running for the presidency by so many different people here in this country. I mean, you have different groups. You have Black women for Harris. You have LGBTQI plus for Harris. You have granddaddies for Harris. You have military men for Harris. I mean, all sorts of groups came and rallied behind her because I think there was a significant momentum very early on after Joe Biden announced that he would not seek re-election and endorsed her. But unfortunately, that momentum was just not sufficient to earn her the victory to the White House.
Wow. So, well, she did run, and let's not say she lost, but she did do quite well at the polls. Generally, so far, America has had two, I would say, overqualified women run for the president's, the office of the president in the country. And they've made history in American politics. Hillary Clinton, as we remember, First Lady, and then Senator, and then Ambassador, I believe, and then Secretary of State under the Obama administration, Kamala Harris, District Attorney for San Francisco, and then Attorney General, re-elected in 2014. She also rose to become Vice President in Joe Biden's administration. What is missing, from these two women? Because they both lost to the same man, Donald Trump, in the election. What was it about Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton that made them lose these elections? Joanna?
Well, in the case of Hillary Clinton, I think that some of her foreign policy decisions did end up hurting her. And also, I think that at the time she ran, the country was looking for a fresh face. They were looking for a fresh voice. And Donald Trump surfaced. And Donald Trump said the things that were on the minds of Americans. He was not your typical politician. He talked to the issues that Americans were dealing with day in and day out. whereas Hillary, in her case, she spoke as an establishment woman, which she is. She's an establishment politician. And I think that people in the rural America were kind of fed up with politics as usual. They wanted something fresh, something new. And Trump provided an alternative. Whereas with Vice President Harris, there are a multitude of reasons why she did not secure the presidency. One of them is that Vice President Joe Biden announced that he would not seek re-election roughly 100 days before election day. So that did not give VP Harris sufficient time to campaign and to also craft her message. And secondly, I think that when it comes to VP Harris differentiate herself from Joe Biden, we have to be honest. I don't think she did a good job. And one of the reasons why President Biden announced that he would not seek re-election is because the Democratic Party had done significant research and studies had showed that he would not win against Donald J. Trump. It was just not going to happen. So therefore, they needed an alternate candidate. And the establishment, the Democratic establishment, did not want Kamala Harris either. In fact, Barack Obama, Speaker Pelosi, and many others within the party, they wanted to have an open convention in order to make the race a lot more competitive. But because of the way that Joe Biden announced his support for VP Harris, the party did not have sufficient time to have, not even sufficient time. The party did not want to appear as the party of dysfunction and not back VP Harris when the sitting president has essentially endorsed her. So therefore, the party had to rally behind VP Harris and to support her presidency. But throughout the campaign, she didn't do much to differentiate herself from a president that was not going to win the election. When you ask her about issues around immigration, while I understand she did not want to throw Joe Biden under the bus, she essentially did not necessarily provide an alternative to what was happening in the country currently. And then when it comes around issues around the economy and employment, while yes, employment rate is at all times high here in America, the administration has done a really good job in making sure that folks are employed. But the cost of inflation has gone through the roof. Yes, you are employed, but yet you cannot afford groceries, right? And whereas former President Donald Trump spoke to the issues that are impacting the American people. He talked about, the immigration crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. He talked about the economy. He talked about ending the war between Israel and Gaza. And he also talked about the amount of money that the United States is giving to Ukraine to fight against Russia. And the American people wanted to hear that kind of talk, because the American people see that they cannot afford groceries, but at the end of the day, the American people, the American taxpayers' dollars are being used to support a war between Russia and Ukraine.
Professor Bellarmine, do you think Kamala Harris's strategy was poor for this election?
You cannot actually call it a poor strategy, because if I know Kamala Harris did not have any time. I think she had just a little over 100 days to launch and carry out her campaign, and that in itself could be maybe a disadvantage for her. However, when we look at it, even for Hillary Clinton, that had the entire time, Hillary Clinton couldn't make it, even though Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote. But with the electoral colleges and all that, electoral votes, she was not able to make it. I'm not going to probably, assess the strategy as not adequate. Kamala Harris's strategy. But there are certain things that probably, worked against her. Definitely the economy is one of it. And the fact that Kamala Harris is part and parcel of Joe Biden's administration, it is very hard for Kamala Harris to disassociate herself from Joe Biden's administration, because whatever this administration is bringing forth will always be there, to challenge whatever Kamala Harris puts forth. And that was, one of the yardsticks, actually the major yardstick was used to measure. Because of course, Donald Trump, always start his, rally as, are you better off now than 4 years ago? So whatever strategy that she brought forth, it's very hard for her to distance herself from Joe Biden. Therefore, whatever that has happened in the past 4 years, which we all know, the economy was one of them, immigration was another one, foreign policy was another one. So those will always, challenge whatever strategy that she puts forth. And a lot of analysts have mentioned that, that lack of time, because as a vice president, you're not that powerful, you're not that popular. In fact, there was a poll that actually showed that even on election day, a lot of people were not actually familiar of who Kamala Harris was. So that limited time really did a number on her. And maybe another strategy might be, also to, in fact, form a more coalition, especially with the Democratic Party. If they had started a little bit earlier, that would have been great. But, I will have to say this, I think Kamala Harris ran a very good campaign.
Yeah, I think it was impressive, for her at the end of, I mean, I knew she would do well, but I mean, she did quite impressively. Just a shame that she didn't clinch, it didn't make her dreams a reality, and a dream for a lot of women in America. What do you think she should do now, Professor Bellarmine, now that, she's run for the highest political office? Should she step out of the political scene? What are her options?
Wish I could make that decision for her. I have no idea what she plans to do. But definitely, I would say Kamala Harris is a personality that definitely needs to use her expertise, in several ways. In fact, a lot of universities will benefit from her experience. I mean, I don't know what she plans to do, but these are just, coulda, shoulda, woulda, ideas. She will definitely make a very good professor out there, and I think she's young. She's 60 years old, so she has a lot of energy. She still has a lot of years ahead of her. So if she wants to continue in the political realm, and I think she will do a fantastic job. But that is left for Kamala Harris to make the decision.
Interesting that you refer to her as young as she's 60 years old. I guess it's because the other candidates who would probably have run for office are obviously much older than her. Donald Trump is almost 80. Joe Biden himself is over 80 himself. So yeah, Kamala Harris is young. Joanna, what do you make of President-elect Donald Trump's nominations, beg your pardon, for Chief of White House Staff, the first female to be appointed to that position, Susie Wiles, and then now U.S. Ambassador to the UN? What do you make of women being part of his administration and being named so early on ahead of January 20?
I think it's a good thing that President Trump is making his nomination so early on, because as we know, the Senate confirmation process can take up to 2 years sometimes. And in fact, President Trump has asked senators to stay around during the holiday to confirm some of his candidates so that we can get the ball rolling and start working from day one. Because the process it's very intense. I mean, you're talking about going through a very in-depth background check. You have to get a security clearance. You have to go through the committee. You have to have a hearing. And then the committee decides, based on the information that is in front of them, whether or not you are fit to be a member of the administration or a member of the cabinet. So I think that based on Mr. Trump's previous presidency, he understands what at stake. He understands the process now, and he wants to get the ball rolling from day one. Because sometimes you have a president, but the cabinet is not confirmed until weeks and months, and sometimes a year after the president has been sworn in. So I think it's a good step in the right direction, because I think the American people want a government that is working, from day one. The American people does not have time to waste. The American people want a better economy. The American people want issues around the border to be addressed swiftly. In fact, he also announced a border czar who will be responsible for the border issue as well just last night. So I think it's a great step in the right direction to do this swiftly.
Now, you're both very intelligent women. I'm sure either of you would easily win any office you ran for. If you had an advice for another woman who's probably bold enough to run for the office of the president again, what would your advice be? Professor Bellarmine?
Yeah, like I said earlier, women are really fully involved in top political positions across the board, all over the world. And I think there is a need for women, to form a coalition, to support one another. There are women who have, risen to high heights, presidents of countries, and who have worked in the House of Parliament. And I think there is need for women, for someone else who is coming out, to run for the president of the United States. Definitely, there is a need for that person to, form a coalition some more with women, and to reach out to people, to listen and find out what people really want. I know it is going to be challenging because, there is always that expectation for that person to really, prove herself. And I say this as a communication professor, I cannot but bring in the muted group theory. And muted group theory, even though that it pertains only to language, language is formed and constructed by men. And for a woman to step into, to own that language, you have to pattern yourself to reflect and to mirror, the men's world. And I think this also, applies to in a political field. Like I said earlier on, only about 6% of, heads of state all over the world are women. So for a woman to step in there, I need to say this is going to be very challenging because the expectations are going to be high for you. And there is that need for that woman to prove that, yes, you can still be a stronger candidate. You can still fit into that role of, protector. You can still fit into that role of a provider. In other words, you can still maintain and, extend, and improve the economy of the country and immigration and foreign policies. But beyond that, and I think there is a need for women, to form that coalition. And I cannot but include that, these have been happening in small scale. For instance, there is a coalition of women, women of mixed methods, a branch of, mixed method groups, that I'm part of, women get together and they look at, leadership, they look at, mentorship. So there is need for women to extend and tap from other women's experiences. And also there is a need for women to actually support women.
Right.
Because when you look at the presidency...
I'm sorry, Professor, we're going to have to let Joanna speak here. So sorry, we're actually running out of time. Joanna, your thoughts really quickly.
I think, one, women have to be bold. We see a lot of mediocre men running for higher offices, and they're not any smarter than us. Some of us women are incredibly...
Okay, we do seem to be having problems with your audio, Joanna. We do apologize. We seem to have lost audio with Joanna. Thank you, National Security Law and Foreign Policy expert Joanna Blong and Professor of Communication and Media Studies at Murray State University, Kentucky, Senior Professor Bellarmine Ezuma. Your first appearance on The World Today, the first of many, I believe. Thank you, ladies, for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you, Amarachi. Always a pleasure.
Welcome back. We turn our attention now to the crisis in the Middle East. The Lebanese Health Ministry says the death toll from Israeli attacks on Lebanon since the beginning of the conflict has risen to 3,189. It says the toll of injured people also rose to more than 14,000. On Sunday, the health ministry said at least 20 people were killed, including children, after Israel launched airstrikes in the town of Almat in northern Lebanon. The Israel Defense Forces also issued a statement on Sunday saying the army killed a commander of the artillery unit of Hezbollah in Lebanon. The IDF said the Israeli army discovered and destroyed a large underground tunnel of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon with a command room and weapons storage facilities inside. Hezbollah says the same day it fired rockets at Israeli troops and other targets during the day. And amid the ongoing Israel-Hamas war, trucks carrying the World Food Programme humanitarian aid have been allowed through the Erez crossing into northern Gaza. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the United States will decide this week whether Israel has made progress towards improving the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip and how Washington will respond as Israel begins to make its case. The U.S. deadline is set to expire just days after global food security experts say there is a strong likelihood famine is imminent in areas of northern Gaza as Israel pursues a military offensive against Hamas Palestinian militants in the area. The United States has said it is watching to ensure that Israel's actions on the ground show that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government does not have a policy of starvation in northern Gaza. In another development, dozens of pro-Palestinian protesters have been detained by police in Amsterdam after defying a ban on public demonstrations. Clashes also erupted between police and hundreds of demonstrators who gathered in Dam Square, calling for an end to the war in Gaza. Demonstrations were temporarily banned by Amsterdam's mayor, Femke Halsema, after Israeli football fans were targeted in what she called hit-and-run attacks on Thursday night following a match between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Ajax Amsterdam. The Israeli government has advised citizens to categorically avoid Israeli sports and cultural events while abroad. In the meantime, some world leaders, including Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, are attending the Arab Islamic Extraordinary Summit in Riyadh, the Saudi capital, which is set to focus on wars in Gaza and in Lebanon. The summit is held at the invitation of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Those in attendance also include the Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Sudan's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, Turkish President Recep Erdogan, Qatar's Emir Sheikh bin Hamad Al Thani, amongst others. Gaza's war has ignited a much wider conflict in the Middle East, with Israel staging a ground operation in Lebanon and sending forces into its south to fight Hamas's ally and Iran-backed group Hezbollah. The UN's annual climate conference has begun with world leaders from around 200 nations. Due to appear over the next 2 weeks, COP29 is being held in Baku, the Azerbaijani capital. The assembled delegates will discuss ways to limit and prepare for future climate change. A particular focus will be how countries plan to limit long-term global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This year has been projected to be the hottest on record, breaching the vital 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold for the first time. Global talks will continue until November 22nd. Our correspondent, Ayola Kasim, is in Baku. She sent this in.
Delegates arrived in Baku bearing in mind that after 10 months, 2024 is now virtually certain to be the warmest year on record and the first year of more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And with the weather crisis this wreaks across the world, it is a reminder that Baku needs to deliver.
29th session of the Conference of the Parties.
With the meeting called to order, nations are once again asked to deliver dramatically stronger ambition and action in the next round of climate plans and increase climate adaptation efforts, starting with a commitment to act on finance.
And here in Baku, we must get international carbon markets up and running by finalizing Article 6. We need to move on mitigation so targets from Dubai are realized. We mustn't let 1.5 slip out of reach.
The African group of negotiators, which Nigeria belongs to, has set a $1.3 trillion new collective quantified goal target per year that wealthy nations, which are historically heavy polluters, must offer developing countries from next year, replacing the previous commitment of $100 billion annually.
And everyone is watching, and they're waiting. Africa is waiting. Asia is waiting. Europe is waiting. The Pacific is waiting. North America is waiting. South America is waiting. The Caribbean is waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, they're waiting for us to show leadership. And they cannot afford the cost of delay. So let us enhance ambition and enable action. Let us move forward in solidarity for a green world.
To observers, despite the clear evidence of spiraling climate crisis, the scale of response to tackle climate change has been what they call woefully inadequate.
And if you remember the 100 billion, a lot of that was actually repackaged aid and effectively auctioning developing countries to take on loans to contribute to solve a problem we didn't create in the first place. That is a scandal of the current climate finance that we have. And that is not something we can actually accept. And if you look at the international climate finance architecture, something that was created when majority of our countries were still colonies, it's a rich historic polluter who will continue to call the shots in each of the international financial institutions.
Rebalancing the whole playing field is what is said to be needed to solve the climate crisis. Tense negotiations over finance are expected during the next 2 weeks as Global South countries are pushing for reforms at the international financial institutions and multilateral development banks to be more responsive to their needs in terms of climate change and debt distress. From the Olympic Stadium, the venue of COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
Ayla joins us now from Baku. Ayla, great to see you. What has been happening at the conference today?
We have the opening ceremony today at the conference, and of course there's been plenaries, and different groups have been coming up with their expectations for the COP. And one major thing that people have been talking about is that this is COP of finance, and then there's this new target that's going to be set here at the COP, which is the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. And this is expected to replace the $100 billion annually that was promised by the developed countries. Many are hoping that at least $1 trillion will be promised over the next 10 years, or annually over the next 10 years. African group of negotiators particularly are asking for $1.3 trillion annually till 2030, so that they can be able to cope with the impact of climate change. That's what has been going on at this point in time.
Of time getting there. But aren't there any conversations get towards a UN report today about 2024 being the hottest year?
New report, WMO is talking about it, and then also there's this word going on saying virtually certain. That's the phrase being used. Is that it is virtually certain that 2024 will be the hottest year on record. And now all eyes are on Baku. That something must be done. Countries must come together to make sure that they do something. And coming on the heels of the COP, coming here, we've heard of wildfire. Even in Nigeria, we had the Borno state flood, and then of course Spain just last week, the floods there all over the world. All the continents are battling with the extreme weather conditions. The battling with the climate crisis, and of course with the years, we are on track to the temperature record is on track to be 3.1 degrees Celsius instead of 1.5 degrees Celsius. In fact, this year we surpassed 1.5 degrees Celsius. So definitely is on here. This conversation is being held here in Baku.
Yes, and how much progress has COP made with regards to policy implementation on regulation of greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, last year at COP29 in Dubai, first of all, actually entered the text. That was the first time in COP history that they mentioned, first of all, that something will be done about that. And again, talking about progress, if you like, I don't really know. People like exporting countries, gas exporting countries now have their pavilion here, even at the COP, talking about what they're doing, looking at, they have a pavilion, they want to talk about what they will be doing to reduce emission as well. So it depends on who you're talking to, really, in terms of progress. Some are saying doom and gloom, some are saying that it's better we bring everybody to the table, like Nigeria, for instance, the impact of our subsidy removal on the economy and everyday people, their livelihoods. But then, in terms of progress, we hope that the finance that is needed to combat the impact of climate, to reduce the impact of climate change, with a new collective, quantified goal, something positive will happen.
Yeah. And you did mention the COP meeting last year in Dubai, where countries agreed to transition away from fossil fuels. So some progress in that direction, I believe. How can COP, however, track this to ensure compliance?
Track whether countries are going to move away from fossil fuel or not. There's something called nationally determined contribution. That's the climate plan of each country. The new one, that's NDC 3.0, they are calling it, should be ready. Countries are supposed to submit it the next COP, that is in Brazil. They're saying that you see through the country's action plan, you can track their progress, and then like business as usual scenarios, like if you want to be emitting and all, what you're going to do to change the position that you are right now. So the one that was set before now, 5 years ago, is expiring next year. So new countries are having new ones to be made as we speak. So that's the level that we are right now. What we have on the table right now cannot sustain us. It can only take us to 3.1 degrees Celsius path. So countries need to change their national climate action plan. That's their NDCs, their nationally determined contributions, in order for us to get to the path where we want to be.
Thanks again, Ayola. Ayola will be there for the 2 weeks of the summit, bringing us updates on discussions there. It was a tragic scene in Mexico over the weekend when 4 gunmen stormed a bar in the central state of Querétaro and opened fire, killing 10 people. The attack also left 7 others injured. Officials say 1 person was in custody. That's police custody. Investigations are ongoing into the incident. Querétaro is commonly prone to high levels of violent crime, such as homicide, and is considered relatively safer than many other areas of Mexico. Authorities say this incident has added to a wave of violent crime that has gripped several areas of the country. Haitian Prime Minister Gary Conille has been fired by the country's ruling council less than 6 months after he took office. An executive order signed by 8 of the council's 9 members named businessman and former Haiti Senate candidate Alex Didier Fils-Aimé as Conille's replacement. Mr. Conille, a former United Nations official, was brought in to lead Haiti through an ongoing gang-led security crisis and had been expected to help pave the way for the country's first presidential election since 2016. He described his ousting as illegal, raising serious concerns about Haiti's future. A Church of England bishop has called on the Archbishop of Canterbury to resign, calling his position untenable after damning reports into abuse by a prolific child abuser associated with the church. Bishop of Newcastle, Helen Ann Hartley, is the most senior member of the church to call on the Most Reverend Justin Welby to stand down following the horrendous and shocking reports. Mr. Welby is facing mounting pressure to resign after it emerged last week that he did not follow up rigorously enough on reports of John Smith's QC's abhorrent abuse of more than 100 boys and young men. A review of the church's handling of Smith's case said Mr. Welby could and should have reported the case to authorities when details were presented to him in 2013. That, however, is not stopping celebrations of the British Council here in Nigeria, marking 80 years of its presence in the country, supporting peace and prosperity by building connections, understanding and trust between people in the UK and countries worldwide. The organization held a ceremony to celebrate in Lagos. The British Council office on Thompson Avenue, Ikoyi, Lagos, bustling with activity more than usual as it welcomes guests, partners and employees to the celebration of its 80th anniversary in Nigeria. Guests take pictures with the British Council props on the grounds as visual artist Hanifa Adam live paints portraits of Nigerian youths portraying the theme for the celebration, amplifying voices of the future. Inside the hall is a formal welcome by the acting country director of the British Council, Chilufia Bessa, and an opening address by the Deputy Head of Mission, FCDO, Simon Field.
Amplifying the voices of the future is especially fitting for our 80th anniversary in Nigeria for several reasons. But the most important of which is Nigeria has one of the youngest populations in the world, with nearly 70% of its population under the age of 30. By adopting this theme, we're indicating our commitment to empowering young people who are Nigeria's future leaders, creators, and innovators.
The creative industry, I'm sure we can all agree, has been identified as one of Nigeria's fastest growing sectors and one of the fastest growing sectors globally. In the creative sector, the British Council has worked with hundreds of Nigerian artists and enabled collaboration with their British counterparts, helping to showcase Nigerian creativity across a global stage.
Years of groundbreaking discoveries and insights.
Poets Kehinde Adolo and King David Ayo Loto give special renditions highlighting the British Council's work in Nigeria.
If you're going to make money from a thing, you have to have a stake.
2 fireside chats laden with business patrons and government officials discuss financial freedom in the present economy and how they overcame challenges in finding their purpose.
You collaborations, look at how you're all here, take pictures, put it up, let that sign show. I'm telling you, it just hypes you up. And it has helped us, both financially and also helped us as a company to always want to maintain the standards, the quality, integrity, because we don't want to fall British Council's hand.
Yeah. You talk about access to capital, access to resources. Quite a lot of upcoming have forgotten anything about regulation. and regulations can easily kill you down.
Founded in 1934, the British Council is governed by a royal charter. It works in over 100 countries, promoting a wider knowledge of the United Kingdom and the English language, and encouraging cultural, scientific, technological, and educational cooperation with the United Kingdom. On Sunday, royals and political leaders gathered to commemorate Britain's war dead at the annual Remembrance Sunday parade. King Charles was joined in military dress by Prince William and Princess Anne, with other royals, including Princess Kate, looking on from the balconies. Queen Camilla did not attend the event as she recovers from a chest infection. For the first time since coming to power in July, Prime Minister Keir Starmer laid a wreath on behalf of the government, while newly chosen Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch laid a wreath on behalf of the opposition. Remember, Sunday, marked every year on this Sunday nearest to November 11, commemorates service men and women who died at war. And that's it on The World Today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.